Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We are so happy to have you joining us today, and we are so excited to be doing this collaborative webinar with the Foreign Language Association of North Carolina, FLANC. Today's topic is leveraging the Seal of Biliteracy for higher education world language placement and enrollment. And I'm so excited about our presenter and about working with FLANC on this project. So before we get started, I do just want to go through a few housekeeping details with you, just to make sure that everyone knows what's coming up. Today's webinar is being recorded, and so you will be receiving a link tomorrow and an email since you register for the webinar. And in that email, there will be a link to a participant folder where you will have access to a certificate of attendance. And you'll also have access to the slide deck and to a PDF document of today's chat. So as you guys are sharing your experiences and your thoughts and your reflections today, please be sure to share those out in the chat. And to also, if you tweet, be sure that you are tweeting using our hashtag, which is PowerOfSealK20. You can follow along on Twitter today. There are going to be things posted on social media, and you can see on the screen there where we have our social media handles. For FLANC, it's at FLANC_WorldLang. And for More Learning, it's at More Learning. So I forgot to even introduce myself. My name is Dawn Samples, and I'm the director for More Learning. And so I work at Avant Assessment, and we provide professional learning to help support your proficiency-driven practices. So I'm so excited today to be able to welcome our guest with our webinar today, who's going to be my help in helping me moderate today. We have today Robbie Richwine, who is the president of FLANC. He's the current president. He's also a graduate of UNC Chapel Hill and Wake Forest University. Robbie teaches all levels of French at Reagan High School in Winston-Salem in Forsyth County Schools. And Robbie, we're so happy for you to be with us today. Thank you so much for joining and for working on this with us.
Well, thank you so much, Dawn. And I am so happy to be here on behalf of FLANC in partnership with Avant. We are so excited about this webinar, and I will be helping to facilitate the chat and the Twitter feed. So any questions you have for our presenter, please put them there, and then we will answer those as we go along. So I am pleased to introduce to you Kristin Davin. Kristin is a FLANC board member. We are FLANC, the Foreign Language Association of North Carolina. So good to see so many North Carolina people here, and welcome to everyone else. Kristin is our Catalyst, which is our newsletter. She's our Catalyst editor for FLANC. She is also associate professor and the program director of foreign language education at UNC Charlotte, and her research focuses on language assessment, language teacher development, and language policies related to multilingualism, most notably the Seal of Biliteracy. So it is my pleasure to welcome Kristin, and I see you there. And I will turn this over to you, Kristin.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here with you all tonight. I'm so excited to talk with you about the Seal of Biliteracy and how it's being leveraged by colleges and universities, because this is a topic I'm really passionate about. So there are 4 essential questions that I'm going to speak about tonight. They are basically, what is the Seal of Biliteracy, to get started? How are institutions of higher education, which I'll refer to as IHEs, awarding credit to Seal of Biliteracy earners? How are IHEs leveraging the Seal of Biliteracy for placement decisions? And how does awarding college credit to Seal of Biliteracy earners impact enrollment? So that I'm going to follow that outline tonight. We're going to start with the poll. I believe that you all have been putting your name and the state that you're from in the chat, but I'm going to, Dawn is going to send out a poll to, yep, here you go, to respond to what type of institution do you work in, and how familiar are you with the Seal of Biliteracy on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being not familiar and 5 being quite familiar. So take a minute to respond to those 2 questions. Okay. And let's keep going then. Okay, so the first question that I'm going to go over is, what is the Seal of Biliteracy, for those of you who may have answered lower on that scale. So the Seal of Biliteracy recognizes high school graduates that are proficient in 2 or more languages. And this policy originated in California to counteract restrictive English-only policies. So advocates and stakeholders got together there in a group called Californians Together, and they developed this policy with the thought that recognizing students for their bilingualism and biliteracy might change deficit-based views of speaking more than 1 language. And once this policy, passed in California and other states heard about it, it really spread very quickly across the United States. Because it was a grassroots effort, there was no federal funding, it wasn't a top-down policy, the characteristics of the Seal of Biliteracy do vary somewhat from state to state. But currently, the policy has been adopted in 42 states. As you can see on this map, all of the blue states have some form of the Seal of Biliteracy. The states that are in other colors are either considering it or it's in early stages. So, all states are in some process of adopting a state Seal of Biliteracy policy. There are variations, as I mentioned, in the policy from state to state. For example, in regard to the tiers available. So many states just have 1 tier. There's 1 Seal of Biliteracy, and you meet the requirements for that 1 seal, then a student who meets those requirements gets the seal. However, there are some states that have multiple tiers. So for example, a student who achieves a certain level of proficiency in the world language, a higher level might get a platinum seal, and a student who earns a slightly lower level of proficiency might get a gold seal. So for example, a student who scores advanced low on a proficiency test might get a platinum. A student who scored intermediate high might get a gold. So that varies from state to state. The minimum required proficiency level in world language varies. So some organizations such as ACTFL, NABE, TESOL, Californians Together, and Assessful came together and created some guidelines on how to create a Seal of Biliteracy policy and how to implement it. But those weren't released until 2015. They were recently updated in 2020. And there were many states that had already adopted their policy before those came out. So in the most common proficiency levels required by the Seal of Biliteracy for the world language are intermediate mid and intermediate high on the ACTFL proficiency scale. But there are some states, for example, that the minimum is set at intermediate low. So you'd want to, you can go to the sealofbiliteracy.org website where that map came from, and you can get details on some of the differences and also, look into the different policies across the states. Another variation in the Seal of Biliteracy policies, and this is going to become important later on when I get to the college credit part, but is the method of demonstrating world language proficiency. So the majority of states require students to demonstrate their proficiency on a language assessment, such as Avant assessment's STAMP, the standards-based measurement of proficiency. Dawn, I apologize if I just messed that up. And ACTFL's Apple assessment. So the ACTFL assessment of performance toward proficiency in languages. Those are two of the most commonly used assessments that students can take to demonstrate their proficiency in the world language to get the Seal of Biliteracy. And when I say that the minimum required proficiency level is intermediate mid, for example, the student has to demonstrate an intermediate mid level of proficiency in the 4 domains of reading, writing, listening, and speaking, or the 3 modes of communication. However, there are some states that have a seat time option for demonstrating evidence instead of an assessment. So in those states, for example, a student can take through level 4 of a world language with a minimum GPA and earn a Seal of Biliteracy. In other states, there are portfolio options. So if there is a language for which there isn't a practical and affordable assessment available for students to provide evidence of their proficiency, they can create a portfolio. The method of demonstrating English proficiency varies as well. So again, with the Seal of Biliteracy, students have to demonstrate proficiency in English and a world language, at least one world language. And in different states, they accept different types of evidence of English proficiency. So in some states, they say if a student graduates from high school, then we consider them proficient in English, meeting those requirements. In some states, it's a minimum score on the SAT or ACT. And in some states, it might be a minimum GPA in the course of study for English language arts. So there are a lot of variations, but the one that's most relevant to my talk today are the methods for demonstrating world language proficiency. So here you can see the ACTFL proficiency pyramid. If you're not familiar with intermediate level proficiency, which is the most commonly required level, intermediate, mid, or high, a student at that level can create with language, ask and answer simple questions on familiar topics, and handle a simple situation or transaction. So if you're in a modern language department and you think about your own courses, you might start to think about, okay, what course and hour sequence would a student who's at that level, what class should they be placed in? So keep that in the back of your mind. And again, as I mentioned before, most commonly students across states must demonstrate proficiency on either a language assessment or in these 6 states, via the seat time. So going through level 4 of a world language class with a minimum GPA. So why does the Seal of Biliteracy matter? Why is this so important? Why should we care about this? Well, in some of the research that I've done with my colleague, Amy Heineke, we found that the Seal of Biliteracy motivates students to continue language study. So when they learn about this option to earn a Seal of Biliteracy at graduation, they think, okay, that's gonna make me more competitive on my college applications. Maybe I'll get a special cord to wear at graduation, or maybe I'll get invited to a special ceremony. So kids in focus groups that we've talked to have said, yeah, I wasn't gonna take a 3rd level of world language, or I was going to stop after 3 because I didn't really want to do an honors class or an AP class. But when I heard about the Seal of Biliteracy, I decided, to stick with it and take another year. We've also had teachers tell us that the assessment data that are provided by these stamp results or these Apple results are invaluable to them. So they're able to look at those data from their students and say, wow, my students all did really well on presentational writing, for example, but they really struggled with interpersonal speaking. I'm going to go back and change my curriculum and incorporate more, interpersonal speaking. So they find those data to be very, very valuable. In a survey that we administered, we found that the teachers reported using the assessful ACTFL can-do statements more, the proficiency guidelines more, and the standards more in their instruction as a result of using these assessments to determine Seal of Biliteracy earners. Alma Castro has done some amazing work. She published a chapter in a book that Amy Heineke and I edited, and she found that when she spoke with students, they talked about how earning the Seal of Biliteracy made them really feel proud of their home language and culture, made their parents feel really proud of that too, and proud of that bilingualism. So that's a really important point about why this matters. And then finally, the direction of this talk today is the potential of the Seal of Biliteracy to pave more equitable pathways to college access. So the Seal of Biliteracy really emerged as an advocacy tool for the education of students labeled as English language learners, or what we like to call emergent bilingual learners. And the idea was that, these students, may have had their schedules dominated by English classes, right? They may not have had the same opportunities to take classes in high school that give them college credit. But with the Seal of Biliteracy, if they can earn credit for these amazing language skills that they have already, then that can reduce the cost of college for them and, put them farther along in their college career, once they get there. So this is where I'm going today. This is something I'm very happy to share with you all. In the focus groups that we've conducted with students, and we've done this in several states, the opportunity to earn college credit was one of the top 3 reasons that students reported pursuing a Seal of Biliteracy. This was something the students were incredibly motivated by. And one student that we spoke with, a 12th grade Somali speaker, I'm going to share a quote that she said, because I thought this was, really insightful. She said, "I think the Seal of Biliteracy is very good and helpful. Like, it can be an opportunity for people who speak more than one language and a way to remind them that their language is important and is valued and is something that will benefit them in their futures, like getting credit." So a lot of the students that we spoke to said that, they got to school in the US and it was, English, English, English. But then they learned about the Seal of Biliteracy and that they could take a test in their home language. And they thought that sent the sign that, wow, my home language, really does matter. So those were some of the major, some of the things that were really important to students. I see that we're sharing, we have our poll results from earlier. So if you take a look at this, what you see here is that we have a good array of people from different levels today. We have quite a few high school teachers or faculty or staff. So I'm so glad you all are here so that you can help me advocate for this. And we have quite a few college, university folks as well as elementary, middle, and community language school. I love this because this really does show you the Seal of Biliteracy is K-20. In terms of the scale with representing familiar to not familiar, we have, again, a broad range, but we have quite a few, 27% who are very familiar. So that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Dawn. Okay, before we move on to our next 3 essential questions, I'm gonna bring Robbie on for a quick Twitter chat check-in.
Okay, so we had a couple questions, Kristin, about colleges specifically, and it looks like some people were helping to answer these in the chat. So thank you for that. So maybe just quickly, could you talk about, do most colleges give credit for the Seal of Biliteracy? And there was also a question about how the Seal of Biliteracy might help with college applications, given that, I guess, at least in certain states, students can't earn the seal until they've graduated and they've already been admitted and selected their colleges.
Right. These are such good questions. So the first one I'm going to answer tonight. That's I'll delve into that with one of my essential questions, give you some examples of colleges that are doing this, and I'm going to tell you, how they're doing this and what that looks like. So I'm going to save that one. The other one, in terms of college applications, in a lot of states, the students they know that they're going to earn this Seal of Biliteracy before their senior year of high school. So whether that's from, a lot of them have opportunities to take the language proficiency assessment in their junior year or an AP language test in their junior year. And so they know before their senior year. And a lot of schools will tell students, you're on track to earn the Seal of Biliteracy as long as you finish your English language arts requirements. So there are some students who before their senior year know that they're going to earn the Seal of Biliteracy. But you're right, a lot of students may not know until their senior year. So it may not be as much of a tool in terms of helping them get into college, but it's still very motivating, if they can get college credit for that.
Kristin, real quick, we also have a question in the Q&A. I don't know if you saw that. It's a question that says, some students wonder if there's any possibility to have a seal of triliteracy.
Okay, yes, I love that question. So actually, for example, in Minnesota, they have, in addition to their bilingual seal, they have a multilingual seal. So students who are proficient in, 3 languages or more can earn this multilingual seal. Most states do not have a different designation like Minnesota does. But with that said, students can earn a seal of biliteracy in multiple languages and list that, on their transcripts. So they can say, you have a seal of biliteracy in, in Somali and in Spanish, for example. All right, I'm going to keep going. Thank you. These are such good questions. Please keep them coming.
Yes, and some we will save for later. I'm keeping track of them. So if you haven't had your question answered, we will try to get to it later.
Good, yes. And my email address is on this PowerPoint, so you all are more than welcome to email me too. So essential question number 2, how are IHEs awarding credit to Seal of Biliteracy earners? So this is probably what most of you came here to learn about. So here we go. So there are 2 states where it's required by legislation for all IHEs in the state system to award credit to Seal of Biliteracy earners. And those are Illinois and Minnesota. Now, the way in which different places do that can vary some, and I'll give you some examples, but all colleges and universities in the state systems there must award credit for the Seal of Biliteracy. However, what we're finding is that there are a lot more places that are participating in this voluntarily. I had a student do a Google search for me because I thought, well, that's the kind of person who's going to be looking for this information. And she was able to find, by searching Seal of Biliteracy and college credit, at least 45 different places that are doing this. And here are some of the examples so that you can see how wide ranging they are across the country. So Central Washington University, Denison, Fordham, Grandview University in Iowa, Kansas State, Pittsburg State, Salem State, Southern Connecticut State, Southern New Hampshire University, Truman State, University of Northern Colorado. And these are just ones outside of, Illinois and Minnesota. So there's quite a few that are starting to award college credit for the Seal of Biliteracy. It's somewhat new, but this list is growing, very rapidly. Additionally, Maine public universities partnered with the Maine Department of Education to institute a similar policy. And I like this tagline here: state and university partnership can reduce college costs by more than $1,500 for Maine families, meet growing workforce need for bilingual workers, and build proficiency in English and additional languages. So you can see that this idea of reducing the cost of college tuition, is a major selling point. Just like how the policies vary from state to state, colleges and universities vary in the amount of credit that they're awarding to Seal of Biliteracy earners. So for example, on the lower end, places like Lakeland College and Kaskaskia College award 2 credits to Seal of Biliteracy earners, whereas Southern Illinois University awards 16 credits to Seal of Biliteracy earners. In my research, what I found is that most places are awarding between 8 and 9 credits. Some IHEs are awarding credit based on the level of proficiency that students demonstrated to earn the Seal of Biliteracy. So for example, at the University of Maine, students who scored advanced low on their proficiency test are awarded 9 credits, and students who scored intermediate mid are awarded 6 credits. And a point I should mention is that to score advanced low on the proficiency assessment, that generally means the student had to score advanced low in all 4 domains of reading, writing, listening, and speaking. If they scored intermediate high in even one of those domains, then the student would have the lower level of the Seal of Biliteracy, or the 6 credits instead of 9. And that's one reason why it's really important for students to have multiple opportunities to take those assessments and score and earn the Seal of Biliteracy. There's also variations in the awarding of credit across places. So the allowable time frame in which students can request credits for their Seal of Biliteracy varies. It's typically 3 years. Typically, students have 3 years from the time they earned a Seal of Biliteracy to request that credit from the IHE. The types of credit awarded also vary. So some places award the credit as transfer credits on the transcript. Some award the credit as humanities credits, and some award the credits as language credits. So that varies by place. And I'm going to give you some examples. And then the procedure for awarding credit also varies. And this is where it gets pretty interesting. So let's look at the first method. So this first method is transfer credit. So institutions that use this process, they award students credit for their Seal of Biliteracy as transfer credits, and those do not count toward their GPA. With this approach, the credits are awarded to students who earned a Seal of Biliteracy in any language. So if I had a Seal of Biliteracy in Vietnamese or in Somali, I'm going to get college credits for that Seal of Biliteracy, even if the IHE does not teach that language. With this method, students have to initiate a request and submit official transcripts that designates the Seal of Biliteracy, that shows that they earned that Seal of Biliteracy within 3 years of their high school graduation. And this process of transfer credit is most commonly found in Illinois and Minnesota, where it's legislated that students earn credit for their Seal of Biliteracy. So one example is the City Colleges of Chicago. So Seal of Biliteracy earners from an Illinois high school earn the equivalent of 4 semesters of college credit at the City Colleges. For languages that are offered at City Colleges of Chicago, the students receive credit for the first introductory course in the same language in which the student earned the seal. So if a student earned a Seal of Biliteracy in French, then they would get credit for the introductory French course there. However, when the student comes to City Colleges with a Seal of Biliteracy in a language not offered there, the student receives 4 semester hours of humanities elective credit. So it varies based on, what language the student earned the Seal of Biliteracy in. A more common approach, or one that I'm finding many more colleges and universities are using, is a retroactive, or also called a back credit policy. This is the most common approach outside of Illinois and Minnesota. And the credits are awarded to students once they complete 1 course in a modern language department, typically with a minimum grade of C. So the students can't get those Seal of Biliteracy credits until they enroll and pass a course in the modern language department. And the languages that are awarded vary by IHE. So I'm going to show you a couple examples again. So at Pittsburg State University in Kansas, students with a Seal of Biliteracy are placed in the 5th semester language course upon enrollment. When they complete that course, the student then earns 15 credits for the first 5 semesters of the language program. So by completing that 1 course, plus having a Seal of Biliteracy, they get 15 credits. And this is available to Spanish and French Seal of Biliteracy earners, because those are the languages offered at the university, the languages that they teach in their department. Another example is Grandview University in Iowa. So at Grandview, students who take 1 course in the modern language department earn 8 credits for the Seal of Biliteracy. The credits are awarded for a Seal of Biliteracy in any language. So this is a very equitable approach. A student who earns a Seal of Biliteracy in Spanish should, or let's say in Vietnamese, should have the same access to, college credit that a student who earns a Seal of Biliteracy in Spanish has. So Spanish Seal earners receive Spanish credits, for example, whereas earners of Seals in other languages receive elective credits. And at Grandview University, this policy is not restricted to students who earned the Seal of Biliteracy in Iowa. It's open to students who come to Grandview from other states as well with the Seal of Biliteracy. So I don't want to lose you yet, though. You might be thinking, oh, this is going to hurt enrollment because they're getting all these credits, but don't go anywhere. I'm going to tell you what's actually happening in just a minute. But first, let's do a Twitter chat check-in. So Robbie?
All right, we are getting so many great questions. Thank you, everyone. We're getting things about specific states. So I'm
Okay.
gonna let you kind of look at specifics and get back to those people, Kristin. But in general, do colleges and other institutions of higher education give credit and honor seals from other states? Are they seen as interchangeable?
Okay, that's a really good question. So I'll start with saying Amy Heineke and I did publish a paper in 2017 in Foreign Language Annals that compared the policies across participating states at that time. I do believe it's available via open access on that sealofbiliteracy.org website if you want to check it out. We're working on an updated version right now, but it's not quite ready yet, but I'm happy to answer those types of questions. Regarding the second part of your question, Robbie, which was,
do states treat various
gotcha.
seals, whatever the state might call them, as interchangeable?
So with the individuals that I've spoken to, so for example, if you were to go to the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign's webpage, they very clearly state that they will provide credit for a seal of biliteracy from any state. So some universities say, yes, we'll do this. Others say it has to be from our particular state. I found that a lot of the ones who are voluntarily participating in this program are awarding credits for seals of biliteracy from any state. So I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end when I get to some hurdles, but it varies is the answer.
Okay, and then we've gotten some questions about less common languages. We also got a specific question about ASL. How could language learners and their instructors go about showing proficiency in some of those less commonly taught languages?
This is a really great question. It's something that, again, Amy and I have written on quite a bit. We have an edited volume that tackles this in one of the chapters, and we're currently, we've written an implementation guide on the Seal of Biliteracy for districts and schools that'll be published by ACTFL later this year in time for the conference. But different states are handling that in different ways. It's a really important equity issue because we need the Seal of Biliteracy to be available to students regardless of what language they speak. And there aren't practical and affordable language assessments that exist, for all languages. Avant Assessment and ACTFL Language Testing International have been working hard to add more languages to their, assessment portfolios or their assessment options. States like Washington and Minnesota have done a lot of amazing work around creating more assessments for less commonly tested languages. Some states are using portfolios for languages for which there isn't an assessment. That gets tricky because you have to find someone to score the portfolio. So that's a big question that I'm happy to provide people with more information on. Should we keep going?
Yes, I was just going to say, we have so many questions, so many questions, Kristin. And I don't know if we'll be able to get to all of them during the webinar today, but I do just want to tell people that it's important for you, if you have questions, to put them in the chat or in the Q&A boxes, because we will be able to access those questions after and help find the answers so that we can get those back to you. So if you have questions, even if we don't get to it right this minute, we will get back to you with answers. Okay, go ahead.
I'll keep going then. And then we'll see how much time we have at the end. Okay, so the third essential question for tonight is, how are IHEs leveraging the Seal of Biliteracy for placement? I have a quick poll here just to find out how students are placed into the appropriately leveled course in your language department. And on a scale of 1 to 5, how well does your process work? Dawn, if you want to launch that poll. Feel free to go ahead and do that. People can respond, and I'm thinking it'll work. Oh, here it is. Here are the 2 questions. Go ahead and click your responses. I'm going to keep going for the sake of time. And then when your responses pop up, when they pop up, I'll share them with you. Okay, so a lot of places are using the Seal of Biliteracy to support their placement decisions in modern language courses. Individuals have told me that it helps to put students in the appropriately leveled course because the Seal of Biliteracy in most places is based on proficiency. Knowing that a student earned a Seal of Biliteracy from a particular state gives you a really good idea of what that student can do with the language across the 4 domains. So that can be a really powerful tool for deciding what level course they need to be in your department. This can reduce the resource burden on departments because you don't have to administer your own placement test or score those tests. It can save students the cost of paying for different assessments. So it can be a really powerful tool. I do have a note here that it's something in states where seat time is accepted as proof of proficiency. There are, I believe, 6 states where that's the case. Just be a little bit more cautious because it might be that a student took 4 years of a world language, but isn't necessarily at the level of proficiency you might expect them to be. A lot of those states where seat time is an option, students also have the option of taking the stamp or the apple or another assessment. And if they do that, then you can see their exact proficiency rating. But otherwise, it might not be as tied closely to proficiency as places that require an assessment. Oh, here are the results of our poll. Okay, how are students placed into the appropriately leveled course in your department? Oh, okay, so see, we have 32% are saying they have their own department test. So this could really cut back on the work there. In terms of the second question, on a scale of 1 to 5, how well does your process work? Oh, this is great. I mean, it's working pretty well at most places. We have 35% gave it a 4, 17% gave it a 5. 21% gave, or 31% gave it a 3. So it sounds like, that's working well. So this perhaps could just be another tool that you could use in addition to what you have going on. So let me show you some examples, or I'm going to provide you with one example of how Southern Connecticut State University is using the Seal of Biliteracy for placement. I spoke with Dr. Raisha Cardone there, and she said that students earn 9 credits through completion of 1 course with Seal of Biliteracy attainment. So that's a retroactive credit policy. They take 1 course and then they get 9 credits for the courses that would have come before that. She said that the use of the Seal of Biliteracy and results from the stamp test is what they use there, is better distributing students across courses. She said that occasionally beforehand there were students who, thought, oh, maybe I won't do so well on this placement test. I'll get put into an easier class and then I'll get a better grade, right? And so then that's hard for the students who are, true beginners because they're intimidated by these students who are much stronger students. And then the much stronger students are bored because the content's too easy. And so the use of this has kind of helped to more evenly and to better, I should say, distribute students into the appropriate course. One thing, I mean, there's multiple things I love about Southern Connecticut State University, but something that I love, one, they have a world language requirement. So all students who go there, have to fulfill this world language requirement. As a result, all students have this freshman seminar and they all learn about this language requirement at the university and the option of getting credit for their Seal of Biliteracy. So I'm going to talk about this later, but a difficult aspect of implementing this is making sure that students know that they can get credit for their Seal of Biliteracy. So I love that all students learn about this in their freshman seminar at Southern Connecticut State University. The university requires all students, like I said, to pass the 3rd semester world language course or earn intermediate low on stamp. I'm going to come back to this example in a few minutes because Dr. Cardone had some really additional great advice for how to do this. Okay, but I'm going to move to my final essential question, number 4, which is probably the one you've all been waiting for. How was awarding college credit to Seal of Biliteracy earners impacting enrollment? So initial evidence is showing that there's been, an increase in language minors with the retroactive credit policy. There's some initial evidence that there's an increase in language majors, but most of these places where I interviewed folks have just started doing this. And so they said it's really too soon to tell to have, strong data on whether majors are also increasing. However, they said that this type of retroactive or back credit policy is providing modern language faculty with access to students to whom they might not have had access to before. So students who might not have otherwise taken a world language course are now, enrolling in at least one course to get that Seal of Biliteracy credit, and that gives them the chance to encourage them and motivate them to continue their study. So for example, at Pittsburg State University in Kansas, where I spoke to Dr. Grant Moss, he was telling me that previously the university had eliminated, the modern language department, and then it had been reinstated as part of the English department. So they knew they needed to attract more students, and they were really interested in how they could do that. At Pittsburg State University, the minor is 22 credits and a major is 33 credits. So students, they have a retroactive credit policy. Students can take the one class in modern languages and pass that course, and then they get 15 credits for the Seal of Biliteracy, which puts them only 7 credits away from a minor. So he said enrollment in the minors have gone way up because students think, oh, I only need 7 more credits and I'll have a minor in this language. I should do that. My hope is that, they'll say, oh, I only need 11 more credits and I'll have a major, and that they would consider staying on. At Grandview University in Iowa, where I spoke to Dr. Amy Schumann, there she explained that once students complete one 3-credit hour course, they earn 8 additional retroactive credits. Again, there the minor is 22 credits. So students, when they get those 11 credits, they're halfway there to the minor. She said it's too early to judge the impact on the enrollment, but she said that this presents a really lovely opportunity, especially for native speakers, which is native speakers of Spanish there is a big population of her students, because it allows the faculty to really impress upon them the value of their multilingualism and the value of continuing to study, that language. So she said that the initial results are really promising there. And then again, I told you I'd returned to Southern Connecticut State University, where I spoke to Dr. Raisha Cardone. She said almost all of the students who earn the credit for the Seal of Biliteracy are staying on for a minor. Something that's really great about Southern Connecticut State University is that students who didn't have access to a Seal of Biliteracy in high school can take the stamp test there and still get credit for that language proficiency. So, because the Seal of Biliteracy is largely voluntary, it's unfunded. There are some states where all districts and high schools participate, but that's not the majority. In most states, it's voluntary. And so there are kids who are proficient in English and another language, but who don't have a Seal of Biliteracy because they didn't have access to that in school. So I really like how Southern Connecticut State University, it's a really equitable approach to allow those students to take the stamp and still get credit for that language proficiency. This was really cool too. She said that beyond the 3rd semester, many of the language courses there also count toward the university general education program, because the 4th semester courses are all content-based. So for example, Southern Connecticut State has a general education requirement called the American Experience. The 4th semester Spanish class, which is called the Latino Experience, one of them is called that. So counts also toward that American Experience requirement. So the students are fulfilling university requirements as well. These courses also count toward the writing intensive requirements of the university. So she said that this was really important because, again, it motivates students to continue language study. They're able to fulfill university requirements, through their language courses. There are 5 hurdles that I want to discuss before, we turn back over to questions tonight. So things that you need to keep in mind if you're going to, if you're going to attempt to implement a policy similar to the ones I've shared tonight. The first is advocacy efforts. So thinking about what you need to do or what needs to happen at the state level or the university level to get people, on board with this type of policy. Perhaps reaching out to individuals at places that have successfully done this to figure out how they engaged in those advocacy efforts would be, a great place to start. Identifying the Seal of Biliteracy earners is actually a big hurdle you might not have thought about yet. Generally, there isn't a question on the college application that asks students if they earned a Seal of Biliteracy. And as one of our attendees pointed out earlier, a lot of students complete that college application before they know if they earned one. So it's really hard to identify what students earned the Seal of Biliteracy. And a lot of students don't know that they could potentially get credit for the seal. So that's why I really like that example from Southern Connecticut State University, where all students learn about this option in their freshman seminar. The other thing to think about is the variation in the Seal of Biliteracy policy across states. A Seal of Biliteracy from one state might mean something slightly different than a Seal of Biliteracy from another state if those two states have different minimum proficiency requirements, or if they accept different forms of evidence. So it's just something to be aware of, to think through. Am I going to accept a Seal of Biliteracy for, any from any state, or just from my own state, or am I going to review it on a case-by-case basis? You wouldn't want to say a student who comes here with a Seal of Biliteracy from any state is automatically put in course 410, for example, because a student with a Seal of Biliteracy from one state might be at an intermediate low level of proficiency, whereas from another state might be at an intermediate high. So it's something to think about. Again, thinking about that unequal participation across districts and schools. As I said before, not all students have access to a Seal of Biliteracy. There was a study by Nick Subtirolou and his colleagues published in the Modern Language Journal that found the biggest predictor of whether a student could earn or had access to earning a Seal of Biliteracy was total school enrollment. So, a student at a very large school in an urban locale like Chicago is more likely to have access to earning a Seal of Biliteracy, for example, than perhaps a student at a small rural school, in Idaho. So, just thinking about how do we make sure that there are equitable opportunities? And again, that goes back to advocacy. We really need to get as many schools and districts on board with, implementing the Seal of Biliteracy as possible. And then finally, fostering equity and access. So offering credit for particular languages. I really like the policies where students can earn credit in the language that they earn the Seal of Biliteracy if the university offers that language. But if the university doesn't offer that language, they can earn, humanities credits or elective credits or transfer credits, so that, a student can earn, basically so that a student who has a Seal of Biliteracy in Japanese or, in Tagalog has the same pathways to earning college credit or the same opportunities as a student who has a Seal of Biliteracy in French or Spanish, for example. As I wrap up and get ready to turn this over to Robbie tonight, I just want to throw out a few special thanks to Avant Assessment and Dawn Samples for hosting this tonight, to Helga Fasciano and Robbie Richwine from FLANC for inviting me to share this work that I hope you can tell I'm so passionate about. Dr. Raisha Cardone from Southern Connecticut State University, who I interviewed for this, as well as Dr. Grant Moss from Pittsburg State University, and Dr. Amy Schumann from Grandview University, who, a lot of this wonderful information came from. So Robbie, I'm gonna bring you back on. I haven't been monitoring the chat because I'm sharing my screen and I've been busy talking, but please share with me any questions that have come up.
Well, so as Dawn said, so many great questions, lots of questions. You all have no idea. But so this one was about a specific state, Arkansas, but I think it's something you could talk about generally when you were talking about advocacy. How would I go about determining if any colleges or universities in my state give credit And if there are no institutes of higher education awarding credit, how would I go about trying to get this change?
Oh, it's such $1 million question. So there is no centralized location that tells you what colleges and universities are awarding credit. I have a spreadsheet that me and some graduate students have put together. I'm happy to share that with anyone who wants it. You're welcome to email me. But there isn't anywhere that you can just go and see a list because it's changing constantly and it's all, so new. In terms of advocating for more places to do it, so many people just don't know about the Seal of Biliteracy yet. And, the people I spoke to that I just, sent a thanks to earlier, they said that once they took this to their administrators and colleagues, that people were really on board and willing to support it. It's just, I think, spreading the word. And, a lot of people I talk to are worried that if they give credit to Seal of Biliteracy earners, that their enrollment's going to go down in their modern language department. And I'm hoping that some of the data I showed you tonight show you that the reverse is true. I think it can really, increase enrollment. Again, this is preliminary evidence. It's research I've just started. So it's a great topic for others to look into also. And I'd love to hear others' thoughts on this. But I think we just need to get the word out there. And I think as more and more colleges and universities do it, for example, one of the people I spoke to said that the neighboring institution had found out that they had this policy in place and they were like, how did you beat us to that? We want to do that too, because they're competing for students. So.
And let's see, we just got a question about Kristin's email. If Dawn, maybe you could put that, pull that out and put that in the chat. I know that will be shared later as well with these slides. Let's see. Here's a question about the Seal of Biliteracy, and could you draw connections between the Seal of Biliteracy for high school and the Global Seal of Biliteracy, which is available to anyone, including university graduates?
Yeah.
Seems like it would be an opportunity to offer students to seek the Global Seal after continued study at the university level.
Yes. So actually, I had a conversation maybe 2 weeks ago with Dr. Kristina Alfaro from San Diego State University. And as far as I know, they're the first one. Well, maybe there are others, but they're the first ones I've heard of that are, doing the Seal of Biliteracy at the university level. And doing the Seal of Biliteracy, I mean awarding it. So they're using the Global Seal of Biliteracy. Students who can, same sort of thing, demonstrate proficiency in English and another language can earn the Global Seal of Biliteracy. And I should back up, I'm sorry. So the Global Seal of Biliteracy is a Seal of Biliteracy that's offered, administered by Avant Assessment. It's different from the state Seals of Biliteracy in that, the state Seals of Biliteracy are for high school students graduating high school, generally from public schools, whereas the Global Seal of Biliteracy is for an individual at any stage in life, as far as I understand it. Dawn, feel free to jump in, who demonstrates proficiency. So it can be for people in the workplace. It can be for people, in college.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be at any level, and it is a standardized threshold for the seal. Some states have that same threshold, like intermediate mid for the initial seal. Other states have an intermediate high level to get the seal. Some states have intermediate low. So that's why you were saying, a college can't just assume to place you into a course, because each state's, criteria for the seal vary, but the Seal of Biliteracy through the Global Seal is standard. It's just, this is what the seal is. And it can be used by learners in high school, after high school, in college, in the workplace. There are lots of different ways to get the Global Seal for people and purposes for that Global Seal. So yeah, I'll put a link to, I think we already had the link go in, but the chat has been so live. Linda Ignatz is in the chat, and she did put a link to the Global Seal in there for you guys, but I'll plug it back in there for you as well. It's a good question.
Perfect.
Okay. Do we have time for another question, Dawn?
Yes, we have 4 minutes left. So
okay,
we do.
Okay, great. So let's see. You kind of addressed this, Kristin, but maybe you can sort of restate this because I think this was important. What about a concern that students who have the seal and then they're getting college credit? There might be some concern. I wish I could see exactly how it was worded, but I just wrote it. Started with instead of credit. Could students be offered, here we go. What about consistent placement into higher level language study? Because sometimes accruing too much credit can be a detriment to student financial aid.
That is true. So I know that some of the individuals, and I don't know a lot about this, but I know in Illinois that has come up from some of the students and teachers who I've spoken to, which is why they have 3 years from graduation to request that credit so that they can request it during their sophomore or junior year of college instead of their freshman year, so it doesn't mess up their financial aid. I don't know exactly how that works, but that's something that is an issue and that people talk about. And whether you will award college credit or not, again, I'm an advocate for that because of equity and access, I should say. But whether you do that or not, it's an extremely valuable tool for placement, for putting students in the appropriate level course based on what they can do with the language in terms of reading, writing, listening, and speaking. So a lot of universities that I've spoken to have said how powerful that is.
Great. I guess we've got about a minute and a half. So there's so many great questions. And as Dawn said, we will be able to look back through these, our chat, and get back to you individually. And of course, you can reach out to Kristin. But just in general, how or where could teachers get more training on this? So they've attended this webinar, they'd like to learn more, they want to go back to their schools, their departments, and help other teachers learn more about this topic. What would you recommend?
That's a really good question. So the book that Amy Heineke and I have just finished writing is an implementation guide. It's a 4 Ps framework of, purpose, programs, partners, and promotion that really walks schools and districts through exactly how to do this in an equitable way. And that's going to be out, I would say, within the next 6 months. And I think that's going to be a great resource, which is why, we wrote it. Other than that, at this point, there are lots of websites. sealofbiliteracy.org has a lot of resources. The Global Seal of Biliteracy has a lot of resources. Candace Black in New York, who runs the language segment of the New York Department of Education, has a lot of learning modules freely available online that walk you through Seal of Biliteracy. Those are intended for folks in New York, but they're very useful otherwise. There's a lot of stuff out there on the internet. There's some, but other than that, there's not like a centralized place that I know of. Although I'm thinking now too, I know that Linda Ignatz and Avant Assessment has at least another one of these types of webinars that provides guidance. So, send me an email about specifically what you're looking for and I'll try to help you. But it's just kind of, and there's National Seal of Biliteracy guidelines too that were published in 2015 and updated in 2020, and those are freely available online. So I'm happy to share these resources.
Yes, and I just put a link in the chat as well for so many of you have questions about the Global Seal and about testing at various levels at middle school, high school, before graduation, after graduation. And that information is all on that link for the Global Seal and all of the different tests that can be used, because they don't have to be Avant assessment tests. The Global Seal has its own board of advisors and they determine which tests qualify. And so that information is on that link that I just put in the chat for you. And we do, you guys are going to get an email tomorrow, and that email will have a link to our YouTube webinars and our YouTube channel with more learning. And there is a webinar that we did last year with Linda Ignatz on the Global Seal that you can view in there. That will give you more information about the Global Seal and different things that it's being used for and how to access that information. To go along with all the rich information that we've gotten from you today, Kristin. It has been wonderful. And I think it's going to take a little bit of time to go through all the different questions that you guys have asked and determined which ones we've answered and which ones we haven't. But just know that you're going to, in your email that you get tomorrow, you will get a link to a folder. And so as we go through your questions and we need to find answers, or maybe even, I don't know, Kristin, we can brainstorm ways after this on how to answer some of the questions. We will put that information in the folder for you so that there's a one-stop place. And if you were interested in the answer someone else had a question to, everything will go in that folder for you. So that way we can keep it centralized for all of you guys that joined us today. Kristin, I cannot thank you enough. Your presentation was fantastic. It was amazing. And I think that this is a conversation and information that's going to continue to grow and evolve. And I so hope everyone out there shares this webinar with everyone that you know, so we can spread the word, especially so we can get higher ed more informed and engaged and excited about the SEAL. It's so good to hear the positive outcomes that are coming out of the data, to relieve some anxiety a little bit, hopefully. So I'm just going to give you guys a reminder. Don't forget, there's a survey that you're going to get when you click exit out of today's webinar. A window will pop open for you where you can complete a brief survey. It would be great if we could hear back from you, what you learned and what your thoughts are in other areas that you're interested in us doing a webinar about. When you complete that survey, another little window will pop up for you that will have a link to your certificate. If you miss that link, don't worry. The certificate will be in the folder that you'll get the email about tomorrow. So everything will be in your folder. So if you miss it today, it's okay. You're going to get another email tomorrow. We have like multiple catches there, so we can catch that. If you want to go back and follow FLANC, find out more about your upcoming conference. I don't know, Robbie, if you want to share about your fall conference, any information?
Sure, real quickly. So our board just recently voted that we're going to have another virtual conference in October. We are really excited about it because our platform that we used previously, Hop-In, people have responded really well to. You can literally hop in and hop out of sessions. So we are looking forward to that. October, someone might have to help me with the exact date, something like 7th or 8th. I should know this, but off the top of my head,
the website is there. You guys can go follow
Yes.
on the website there or on social media. It will be posted for you guys
and
there.
Our theme is Passport to Global Citizenship, Connecting Language and Culture.
Excellent. So you guys make sure that you can follow along no matter where you are. There will be some great presenters there. And now that it's virtual, anyone can come and join. So that's a good thing. And also just want you to know that you can also follow More Learning. If you want to go find out about more webinars that we've done, they're all accessible on YouTube for you. You'll check out the link that you see there. And be sure to follow FLANC on Twitter and on Facebook, and be sure to join our Avant More Learning Facebook group so that you can engage in these conversations and we can continue these discussions. Robbie and Kristin and Helga, it has been such a joy to work with you guys as always, and I'm so thankful for you taking your time and all the effort that you put into putting this together with us today. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
That's all, you guys. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Good night.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.